about, trying to figure out what it's all about. Existentialist, am I worth anything or just discount? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Spending time all alone, sending my songs to the phone, dreaming of a better home, we more focused on trying to hone this craft, witchcraft. I hope the brujas let this last. I don't know.
That was great sounds of Watts with Outside on WNHH LP 103.5 FM New Haven. Myself, Preston, with my partner in crime, Long Island raised, Elm City made. Easy Bluez is in the building. Easy Bluez, you are better with introductions more than me. Who do we have with us today on Behind the Brand?
You know, when you're down and troubled and you need a helping hand, these are the moments where life can be some of the darkest. When you can truly don't see anything worth anything, even getting yourself out of the bed. And that's why it is so super important to have a strong team around you. The people around you, the energy that is created is so super important, especially coming out of the times in which we were all locked further down. Isolation can be real twisted because you get to sit alone with your own thoughts. And from there, you need to go on a journey to help put these thoughts back together and to be able to positively spin these thoughts. Now, for a while, you didn't know exactly what to do. You had to maybe go to your local street pharmacist, try to figure that out. But now there are people who are actually out there understanding the worth of positive enforcement and positive reinforcement. One of the top keys out there, because when you can believe in yourself, you can be bulletproof. And for that, I want to thank our next guest for showing everyone that they are worth the investment in investing in yourself to move forward. Even when you feel the lowest, you can still rise to the heights of the highness. And for that, I want to thank you. So put your hands together. Not if you're driving. If you're driving, please keep your hands at 10 and 2, or we do not need any accidents. But mentally, you can put your hands together for the amazing, we're only going to call her Barb, Nangle. Welcome, bienvenue. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time on radio. I do a lot of podcast guesting and Facebook Lives and IG Lives, but I've never done a radio show before. So this is super exciting.
Yay.
Happy to be the first. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's so super interesting because, you know, there is now this huge uptake on people making sure that they're taking care of their mental health. But this is not something that's just been around. I mean, bookstores have had self-help sections for the longest of times. What makes you think, what makes it more accessible or more socially acceptable now to, you know, do those positive type of things where we'll say even 10 to 15 years ago, Tony Robbins was a joke and now he's kind of more of a guru. What changed?
Yeah, I think one, it's the internet. So online coaching is available to people 24/7 around the globe. Like I have a client in Thailand. You know, I have people that listen to my podcast in you know, all over the world. So the internet has made the promotion of healthy, you know, mental health so much more accessible, and also getting the word out about that. And I think also the internet has made our lives a lot easier in a lot of ways and made things faster. And that means that we can spend time at leisure taking care of ourselves. And then the third thing, I think, is the pandemic. It became very clear that a lot of people were really, really messed up. And when they had to stay in their homes and they had to, you know, not go out and do all different kinds of things, they realized, well, that life wasn't really working for me. Right. And I am not fulfilled. And they had to find simple ways within the walls of their homes and the people that they could be with, and realize, you know, peace is really important to me, you know. So I think it's those things, and I'm sure there's more too.
Now, when you when someone seeks out your services or listens to the podcast, for that first time listener, what is the first step really to this journey of wellness and this journey of, I call it oneness, but that's only because I have no other better word than that.
Yeah. I think realizing that your life is not working for you. In 12-step recovery, we say admitting that our lives have become unmanageable. Like, it's just like what I'm doing isn't working for me. Like, that's the first step. I mean, I think in any problem we say like awareness is the first step, because if you don't know something is a problem, why would you address it?
Okay. It's so super, like for myself in particular, because I'm wired all sorts of differently wrong. It's really, really interesting because you can get to a point you're so conditioned with the darkness that you don't even realize it's a problem, or you feel it becomes, it's a problem, but this is but I'm worth this problem, and this is the one thing that I have that is mine, and I'm going to hold on to that. How do you take people a step outside of that? Because it's really comforting. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes your sadness can be a real comfortable place to be, and sometimes being stuck in that rut can be super, super, super comfortable because it's all you know. And you have this sparkling personality that allows people to take that step outside of themselves. Was that something that you discovered through your recovery journey, or was that something you always had before, you just didn't have a name for it?
Yeah, I want to answer that in two ways. First, I want to address your term of comforting. And I think like what I've discovered is that there's a difference between comfortable and comforting. So my lifestyle was comfortable because it was a well-worn groove, but it wasn't comforting. It wasn't promoting like health and comfort and solace, etc. So when I came to understand that I was comfortable in my life, but it wasn't comforting, and that I really deserved to be comforted, that was a wake-up call for me. And then I was a seeker. I mean, I got introduced to self-help at about 24 and read self-help books voraciously. I started therapy probably at 15. I did workshops and workbooks and work groups and retreats and spiritual groups, and like you name it. I was always a seeker and trying things. And the way that I think about it is those things scratch the surface of the iceberg of my life. When I got into 12-step recovery, it melted the iceberg of my life. And I'd love to take a few moments to tell you like how I got into 12-step recovery, if that's okay. You'll indulge me.
This is 100% your story, and whatever you feel
awesome.
With sharing, please do. But we are on Trusted Radio, so just in case you want to hit it with that punctuation point.
Yeah. Okay. So hello, radio world fans. So in the fall of 2014, I started volunteering on a project at my church. Actually, since we're in the New Haven area, people will probably know Abraham's Tent. And right around the time that project was supposed to start, a homeless guy named Dan started coming to my church as a parishioner, and we became very friendly. And I took this as like a sign from the universe, like I'm meeting a homeless person as a friend. So I'm getting to know homeless people as humans. So I'm not like serving the homeless on this project. I'm serving people, and it felt divinely inspired. And a few months into our friendship, there was a snowstorm, and I invited Dan to stay at my home, which I now know is not normal. And he did. And then he stayed another time and another time. And then a few weeks later, he was practically living with me. I felt trapped in my home. He was an addict and alcoholic, maybe also a narcissist. And he messed with my head in a way that nobody ever had before. And one day in therapy, I was talking about him to my therapist, and in mid-sentence, I stopped and I went, "Oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon?" And she was like, "Yes." So for anybody out there who doesn't know what Al-Anon is, it's a 12-step recovery program for the loved ones of alcoholics. So most people have probably heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the mother program of all 12-step recovery programs. And it's pretty clear why alcoholics might need a program of recovery. But what might not be clear is, why do the loved ones of alcoholics need a program of recovery? And the reason is that alcoholism is a family disease. And the other reason is that the things that we do sort of naturally to either help our loved ones stop drinking or get them to stop drinking are actually counterproductive. They tend to make us completely neglect and ignore ourselves and enable the abuse of the alcohol by the other person. And so I knew about Al-Anon, and so I went home and I went to Google, and I don't know what I put in there, but instead of finding an Al-Anon meeting, I came across the word codependent, and I was like, whoa, what is this word? How have I never heard of this before? Because it explains me. And I have been trying for decades. I've been in therapy for decades. I'm super introspective. And how did I never know this word? So I started going to the 12-step recovery, Codependence Anonymous, and very soon said to somebody, I think I need to be reparented. And I didn't know that that was an actual thing that people do. I thought I made that up. And I have had a whole series of serendipitous events. I call them higher powered moments, which is one reason why my business is called Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, because I am higher powered and my journey has been such. Well,
I like that a lot.
Yeah, thank you. 6 weeks into my recovery in Codependence Anonymous, I went to Cape Cod to visit friends. And Heidi, in that couple, had been in Alcoholics Anonymous for over 10 years and always raved about how dramatically her life had shifted. So I'm telling her about CODA, which is the short name for Codependence Anonymous. And she said, why don't we see if there's a meeting while you're here and I'll go with you. Well, she couldn't find one, but she found an ACA meeting, which is sometimes called ACOA, which stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. Now, I had heard of ACOA. I never understood why those people needed a program. I never thought I qualified, and I hadn't heard the and dysfunctional families part of that. So I walk into the meeting with her because I was like, oh, I'll go for her. Her dad's an alcoholic. I don't need this program. And one thing they said was, we reparent ourselves. And so my jaw hit the floor, as you can imagine, because I was like, wait, that's a thing. And the other thing they did was they read the 14 traits of an adult child, which is affectionately called the laundry list. And I immediately identified with 7 items. I later found out that I actually have like 13 of them, because one of the hallmarks of being an adult child is that you are in denial. So you think things are normal that are not. You don't understand that you've been traumatized. You just, because things are comfortable to you, though they're not comforting, that they just seem like this is just the way that it is. So I stayed in ACA. I stayed in CODA for about a year. And then around that time, because of one of the women I was doing the 12-step with in my ACA program, I found out that I was also a compulsive overeater, and I started going to Overeaters Anonymous. I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. I've been at my goal weight for 5.5 years. I've done the 12 steps of recovery in both ACA and in OA multiple times. Through a whole series of serendipitous events, I ended up starting my own coaching and consulting business. And then in 2019, I launched my podcast, Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. I'm about to put out my 230th episode. 30 or more of those episodes are specifically about boundaries. And the reason for that, and the reason I became a boundaries coach, is that for me as a codependent, which is my core wound, is codependence, the antidote to codependence is building boundaries. And so I could go on forever. I want to stop there and let you guys.
No, that was dope.
There's so much we can piggyback off that. It really is.
Oh yeah, no, for real. Yeah. And it's so super important, and everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different. And you do have all of these outside factors or environmental factors that will either help your growth or stunt your growth. And as you navigate through those things, it is incredible to have community. That's no matter what you believe in, no matter what your belief system is, community is one of the most important things. I mean, Prestige and I just went
Great.
to the Bridgeport Film Festival this weekend, and that really was more the theme. If you want to be in arts, you need a strong community around you. And
Absolutely.
boundaries are so super, super important. And especially coming from a childhood of both dysfunction and addiction. I totally get that. Because let me tell you, and I was a child. I was a child of an addict when you were allowed to send your 8-year-old up to the store to pick up a pack of cigarettes and a couple of beers. As long as you had that note, mom said it's okay. I could take myself up there with my little tie, and it worked out really nice. So it's super, super important as you continue to go through there. And how do you deal with, I call them the aha moments, kind of like, oh, I am not supposed to live like this. Oh, I've been doing it wrong this entire time. Oh, everyone doesn't do that. How do you deal with those moments? Because those are some of the most, I'm going to say, hurtful and sometimes hateful moments or recognition points in anyone's journey. And I'd love to hear how you navigate that, or how you would instruct someone to navigate that.
Yeah,
On
I think
WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven, myself, Prestige, and my partner in crime, Long Island Rays, Elm City Made, EZ Bluez is in the building. We got the great Barb with us on Behind the Brand. Go ahead.
All
You
right,
navigated that so well.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Easy, I will answer your question by sharing two major epiphanies that I had. So the first one was that I was codependent. So I remember saying to my therapist, listen, I don't feel like I got hit in the head with a baseball with this news that I'm codependent. I feel like I got hit in the head with a planet. Like, what the hell else don't I know about myself? Oops, sorry about that.
No,
what
else
don't I know about myself? Because I'm like super introspective. I've been in therapy for 37 years, not continuously. I've read 7 gajillion, like I'm doing the work. And how did I not know this? And she said to me, Barb, I think for you, codependence is a unifying concept. It pulls together a whole bunch of things about yourself you did know, you just didn't know that they were related to each other. And when she first said it, I thought she was just saying it made me feel better. And as time went on and I got to understand more and more about codependence, I realized that it was actually true. So like integrating that understanding. And I think this is one of the reasons why in my first few weeks in CODA, I felt an enormous sense of relief, because there was an explanation about these patterns. And I started to see my patterns as patterns that I hadn't seen before. And then I think for me, the number one most important thing I learned in 12-step recovery is something that we call my part in things. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing to create chaos and to exacerbate the chaos going on around me in my life. And I learned this pretty much in step 4. I think if people know anything about 12-step recovery, they probably know that step 4 is we take a searching and fearless moral inventory of our lives.
Right.
And so I learned all of these patterns that I had and how destructive they were to me and potentially to my relationships and to other people. And so being able to see my part in things has been so important, because one of the other major lessons you learn in recovery is to keep the focus on yourself. So a lot of people also know the serenity prayer, which is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's the big thing, because we may think that we know what we can control and what we can't, but most of us are so unclear about that. And I think that one of the most important tasks of being a human is to continually discern, Can I control this? Can I not? If I can't, then I need to learn how to accept it. And if I can, then I need courage to change, my part in things. And it turned out that, especially as a codependent, I was so focused out there on what you're doing, what he's doing, what she's doing, what they're doing, what does the situation need, what does the organization need, that I wasn't paying any attention to what's going on in here. And this is the only thing I can control. So I'm trying to control the outside world, which is impossible. And that means that's an endless drain on energy because you can't control it. And therefore, I have nothing left to work on what's in here. Never mind the fact that I'm not focused in here. So a large part of what I do as a boundaries coach is get people to keep the focus on themselves. In fact, the first time that I piloted my first group coaching program, the women in the group were just not getting it. And I just came up with this one day. I go, all right, here's the thing. My top 5 rules for boundary setting. Keep the focus on yourself, 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 keep the focus on yourself. And I said it jokingly, but not really. And they got it. And they said to me at the end, like, that was the thing I remember because it was so dramatic, the way that you talked about it. And so they're always thinking, like, how do I keep the focus on myself? Because I'm the only thing I can control in this world. So I hope that that has answered your question about these epiphanies that we have.
No, it's super, super interesting because I come from a completely different side, I guess, of the spectrum. And I'm learning that on an everyday more and more basis because, like, I've never suffered from codependency. I've only ever suffered from, like, ultra self-dependency. So much so that it becomes damaging because people are like, I don't know what you're going through. Let me help you. And I'm like, I got this. Just go over there. It'll be fine. So it's very, very interesting to hear the other side of that. And to really understand that there is 2 sides of the conversation. Everyone is going to go through something and they're going to go through it differently. We say it in art all the time. Every song has already been written. It's just your perspective that is what's missing. And it's very amazing to hear that really just applies to life altogether. And if we can all start looking at life as more just like a living, breathing piece of art, maybe we'd all be, a little bit happier, a little bit better, and maybe a little bit nicer to each other. Or then again, maybe we just have a huge circle pit on the green and we just handle it that way. I'm okay with either option. It really just kind of depends on what everyone else wants to do. Just saying.
Yeah, I will say, like, what you're talking about is like rigid self-sufficiency. That is a hallmark of codependence. So it's not necessarily the other side because codependent people frequently are so focused on other people and what they're doing, and they will not accept help from other people. That is a hallmark of codependence. Like, I'm all about you. And so here's the thing. I thought that I was nice. I thought that my helping and rescuing and fixing ways were because I was a nice person. And what I learned, I remember early in code, I remember saying to somebody, okay, I'm starting to understand there's this continuum of helpfulness where at one end, we've got kindly, helpful, functional, healthy behavior. And the other end, we've got this unhealthy, rescuing, fixing, enabling, dysfunctional behaviors. And I get the difference, the stark difference between those two things. It's in the middle of that continuum. Like, where do we cross over from being healthy to being unhealthy, from being, for example, helping to being rescuing? And the woman said to me, Barb, it really depends on your motives. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it to be helpful to people? Or are you doing it because you want them to like you? And I was like, I'm totally doing it to be helpful. But as that question like sunk in and percolated, I realized I actually was seeking people's approval, or probably more realistically, I was trying to avoid their disapproval. So I did not want people to think I was a bad person. And bad person to me was someone who said no.
Right.
So as this journey unfolded for me, I realized I was a people pleaser. I never identified. I remember hearing the term and thinking, oh, my friend Joanne, she's a people pleaser. But it turns out so was I. because I was super invested in what other people thought of me. And as I started to unravel it more, I found out being a people pleaser is actually dishonest and manipulative. So it's dishonest because we say yes when we really want to say no. And it's manipulative because the motive behind my behavior is to get you to approve of me. I'm trying to manipulate you into thinking a certain thing of me. So when I thought that, I was like, oh my God, I'm a horrible person. I'm dishonest. And I realized, because I was then in ACA, oh, this behavior came from somewhere. I'm not a horrible person. I learned it. It was adaptive at the time. Now that I know it, I got to stop doing it. And, speaking of the dishonesty, I truly believed that I was an honest person when I got into recovery. And oh my God, I was so dishonest. I lied about cigarettes. I lied about drugs. I lied about alcohol. I lied about my relationships. I lied mostly in the people-pleasing department. I was continually saying yes to things, or that things were okay with me, or I lied a lot by omission and not telling the people the truth. And that's another example I mentioned earlier. Denial is one of the hallmarks of being an adult child. I was in such denial about my own behavior. I really believed I was an honest person. And here I was lying all the time. And so for me, like one of the like lines in the sand for me now is honesty. Like if I'm lying, I might as well shoot some heroin, because I never shot heroin. That was not my drug of choice. But it's like, it's over for me because it's a slippery slope to me going back into all my dysfunctional behaviors and back into my, addiction and substance use and all that sort of thing. So I hope that I've answered your question. I've sort of lost the thread of what I was talking about.
It's all right. No, because you went on this
completely fine.
Yeah, you went on this amazing journey with it, and it's so super interesting because I talk about it a lot, and we have been talking about it on the show a lot more. In the journey that I'm going through, what I thought was superpowers was actually all trauma responses, and then you have to deal with the weight of that. I'm like, oh, I used to be able to go out and be the most social person in the entire world until you start digging a little bit deeper, and you're like, oh, you were like that so you could control the room. And you made sure that you were needed at any point in time so that you knew what the standards were going to be, to go outside. And now as you get the healing aspect, now it takes me 45 minutes to an hour to get ready to build up the energy to go and do something like that. So it's just super, super interesting as we heal. Is there a way to hold on to, I guess, the superpowers that trauma has given us?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned trauma response, because one thing I didn't say was I learned that ACA is a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps of recovery. I didn't know that I was traumatized. I didn't get it. And then when I remember saying in my first few months in the program, like I did not have it as bad as many of the people in this room, but I have the traits. And I kept kind of making excuses for why I was there. And when I finally learned that trauma can result from the absence of good things happening, I was like, oh, okay. And then what I learned years later is trauma is the result of unmet needs. So most people think of trauma as I was in a car accident, I was raped, I was in a hurricane. That's what we often call big T trauma. It's a one-time blunt thing. Well, trauma, relational trauma is what I'm talking about. It's the drip, drip, drip of emotional invalidation, etc., gaslighting by your family, that sort of thing. Not feeling emotionally safe. And it results from abandonment. So sometimes it's actual like physical abandonment, children are abandoned by their parents or something like that. But often it's emotional abandonment, like your emotional needs are not met. And no parent is perfect. And it can happen from time to time, and you can still grow up and not be traumatized. It's the pattern of continual, emotional invalidation, etc. So of course, many of the traits that we develop are dysfunctional, but they were adaptive as children. But part of the process of 12-step recovery, especially in ACA, is to transform those into functional things. So being rigidly self-sufficient is dysfunctional. Humans are pack animals. We are wired for connection with others. We are not meant to be rigidly self-sufficient. But you can transform that rigid self-sufficiency into a sense of independence that's healthy. I mean, I think the most healthy state to be is interdependent with other people, right? So I am still a very independent woman, but I've learned to be interdependent. In fact, I'm 60 now. I met my sweetheart at 55. It's the first healthy romantic relationship I have ever had. I happen to be heterosexual, awesome. So all the people I've dated
That's awesome.
men.
Yeah.
And this man that I have been with for almost 5 years now is actually gives me more support and more help than I give him. He doesn't work. I do. And I'm working on building a business, and I have a couple of part-time jobs, and I'm in 2 recovery programs, and I have 5 sponsees, and I have all these clients. So he has a lot more time on his hands than I do. And so I'm still a very independent woman, but I accept help and support from him. For example, he's super handy. So he helps me around my condo. He loves to garden. He's planted 3 garden beds outside my condo. I do no work on them. I just appreciate them. And that's what he likes to do. He enjoys. And I'm able to ask for and accept help in ways that I never was before. But I'm still an independent woman. So I've toned my rigid self-sufficiency down to the point where it serves me. And I would say that it serves my community too, because I don't just accept help from him, I accept help from other people. And if you're the kind of person who only wants to help and doesn't accept help from people, then you are going to attract people who only want help from you and never help you. So if you want to be a member of an actual community and share with people both the good and the bad of your life, both your helping behaviors and your accepting behaviors, then like toning down that rigid self-sufficiency is really important. And I think, one of the myths that there's many myths about boundaries. And one of them is that you're going to be a jerk to people, that you're going to put up walls with people. And I'm here to tell you that I'm actually more helpful now that I have healthy boundaries. So I called myself a volunteeraholic before I got into recovery. When I first got in recovery, I was like, you know what? I'm quitting all of this and I'm going to volunteer for Barb. And that's what I did. And I dove into 12-step recovery. And then in recovery, I learned how to give service with love, as opposed to as a compulsion. Like I must give, I must help, I must save, I must rescue. And so I actually, in terms of hours per week, give more service to my community than I ever did before. So I'm still very helpful to other people, but I'm very strategic about it. I do it by choice. I have limits. And the other thing I do is instead of going to the world with a sense of lack, like I used to before I had healthy boundaries, I go from a place of abundance. So I mean that in a couple of ways. One, when I went to the world before, I went from a sense of lack in that I was like me, approve of me, like I needed something from the world. And I also went from a place of lack because I was completely drained, because I ran myself ragged and never took care of myself. So I was trying to pour from an empty cup. Well, now that I have healthy boundaries, I give to myself first. So you know how they say in the airplane, if the mask falls down, put it on yourself first, because you can't help others
someone else
if you're passed out. Right? They don't say that like that. They don't say you can't help if you're passed out. Maybe it would be helpful if they did. But what I've learned is to fill my cup first, so that I don't pour from my cup, I pour from the overflow. So when I go to the world to give, I pour from an overflowing cup. So I'm not being selfish by putting myself first. I'm being selfless because I'm pouring from an overflowing cup. And I'm not going to the world to get this approval that I was going before, because I approve of me first. I don't need your approval. I would like your approval. It would be nice if you approved of me, but I don't need it anymore because I approve of me. So those are ways in which I used to go to the world from a place of lack, and now I come to the world from a place of abundance.
Barbara, just a quick question. Just everything you just said was just great information. But speaking of setting boundaries, just for normal people, everyday people, what are some ways that we gaslight, but we don't know it at all?
Well, when we tell people I don't need help, like, you're human, of course you need help. Right? So you're gaslighting, like, you may actually believe it. I actually believed that I didn't need help. And actually, I want to say a little something more about asking for help, if you don't mind. I know it's not exactly, I know I've answered the one
it's fine.
about gaslighting, but so learning how to ask for help was a game changer for me, because it was a very humbling experience, because what I came to see was that I thought somehow asking for help was weak. All right. So embedded in that assumption is that weakness is bad. Weakness is not bad. Weak is just weak. It's not strong. It's not bad. Number two, I thought somehow that I was lowering myself down by asking for help from other people, which showed me that on some level, at least subconsciously, definitely not consciously, that I thought I was somehow better than the people that I was helping. If I think I'm lowering myself by asking for help, then that means I have an embedded assumption that the people I've been helping I'm better than them. I don't believe that. I don't believe that intellectually, but clearly on a subconscious level, I believe that. So that's why it was super humbling to learn how to ask for help. And then when I started actually asking for help, well, actually, I want to say something about how I learned it. So I did the 12 steps of recovery in a small group of women. And one day, one of the women said, I was really upset the other day, and I was going to call one of you and ask for support. And I talked myself out of it. And we all realized, like, oh my God, I do the same thing. So we made a pact. We are no longer going to stop ourselves when we want to reach out for help. And then none of us did it. We still, even though we discussed it, we made a pact, we still couldn't do it. Like, that is how hard it is to start asking for help. And then, of course, we eventually started asking for help. And what I've realized now is, like, oh my God, help is awesome. I love help. This is what it's like to receive and to be fully human. I believe we need to have a balance between giving and receiving. And if we're constantly being this rigidly self-sufficient person and never asking for help and thinking like I was like, I don't ask for help, I'm the person that people come to for help. I realized there was a certain arrogance about that. So that was also humbling. So I think, like, one way that you could describe all these misconceptions that I had in my head about help were ways of gaslighting myself. And if I'm gaslighting myself, then I'm gaslighting everybody around. So I hope that answers your question there.
No,
it definitely does answer my question on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. Myself, Preston, with my partner in crime, Long Island Rays, Elm City made Easy Bluez is in the building. Go ahead, Easy.
No, it's so super interesting, because as you hear a lot of similarities, that they're also, at least in the scope of things, there's the pendulum that swings in the complete and total opposite direction. Because, like, for myself, and I share my story, I don't really care what anyone thinks of me. So, for me, it was a matter of, no one's going to show up for you anyway, so just do it. It's going to just take less time, you're it's just you, like, you're just going to knock it out of the park. No one's going to be there, so it doesn't really matter. And then, why ask someone for help? Because you're only going to be disappointed when they don't show up, and then you're going to be mad at them, although you understand that they are super busy and they're living their own type of life. So instead, to alleviate all of that extra argument and all of those feelings, just get up and do it your darn self.
Mhm.
You know, so that's, you know, that's really what it comes down to. And I love that from one perspective, it can seem like a super, I want to say ego driven, but you know, not really ego driven. And the other one is like a super, like just a worth issue, like a self esteem issue. And I love, you know, how the positive and the negative are so
Mhm.
complete opposite spectrum, but the exact
Mhm.
same, if that makes
Yeah.
any sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say like it's like precisely what you described. What you're saying is it was protective for
Hmm.
you to become rigidly self-sufficient. It was
Hmm.
protective for you to actually get your needs met because you had to get your needs met. And it was
Hmm.
psychologically protective because you weren't going to continually be disappointed.
Right.
And then from an ego perspective, what eventually happens is we start to believe we can only be self-sufficient. And then what
Right.
happens is we project this image of self-sufficiency, and so we attract people around us who want to be around people who are self-sufficient, who are people that cannot be relied upon. And so then every once in a while when we do venture out and ask for help from somebody, the people we're surrounded with are people that want help, they don't want to give help, and they're probably
Hmm.
incapable of it. So we reinforce the behavior. I can't depend on the people around me, so I might as
Hmm.
well be self-sufficient. And, you know, that was me. And so what I learned in recovery was how to discern who is a trustworthy person, who is a reliable person, who is a dependable person, and to only ask those people. So, you know, one thing that I used to do before recovery was like I would say, "Oh, I'm a super trusting person. I trust people until they give me reason not to." Well, that was a
Hmm.
lie because I continued to quote trust them even after they showed me that they were
Hmm.
untrustworthy. And then I would get mad at them for being untrustworthy and I would blame them. And going back to I talked about learning my part in things. Well, my part in that was that I trusted the untrustworthy person and expected them to be different. I acted almost like, well, if I just love them enough, they'll turn into a trustworthy person.
Right.
Or I can trust them. Maybe other people can't because I'm in this
Hmm.
special category
Right.
of like helping and rescuing and fixing them. And that wasn't really true. And so I learned over time that trust is built over time. You can only build trust by seeing patterns of behavior, which can
Hmm.
only be discerned over time. And the same thing, like it's trusting to ask someone for help. And so you have to like watch people. And it really, like, one of the things about being in the community of recovery is you're with people at all different levels of recovery. There are people who've been in the program for years and people that came in last week and everything in between. And you start to see, okay, these people are consistent and what they do is what they say. So I can probably trust them. And you start to see there's a difference between how these people are showing up and what their lives look like. And so you start gravitating towards the people that you can actually ask support from and get it. And then you start getting the rewards of getting support and you get reinforced for this
Hmm.
positive behavior. And then you start, like, I started trusting myself. It was actually the process of building healthy boundaries that got me to trust myself, that got me to love myself. I always had high self-esteem. I always liked myself. What I realized was I had low self-worth. If you
Hmm.
look at the history of my life, like, that is not a woman who feels worthy. And now I feel worthy and I love myself and I trust myself. And that happened because of building healthy boundaries. I got to know like what's okay and what's not okay. And I got to learn how to set limits with people and follow through for myself and all that sort of thing. So, like, as you can see, like, all these things are like coming together. They're all
Hmm.
related to each other, like building healthy boundaries and self-esteem and trust and asking for help and support and recovering from trauma and, being honest and all that sort of thing. They all come together.
No, they really do. And for a lot of listeners, I'm just going to say right now, it is completely okay to be terrified of every single word that has been said on this episode today. And not only that, it does show that you're human. So if any part of this did make you feel uncomfortable, there's a whole bunch of people that are out there that are
Mhm.
there to help you. If you
Absolutely.
really super need help, Prestige's mailbox is always open. feel free to hit him up. I am busy because I don't trust anybody, and this is an easier life for me. But you know, as we continue to grow and to move forward through this, what is that next evolution? Because you went from, you know, it being a change in your life, a change in your lifestyle, to now being a way to grow through, help others, but also build generational wealth, we'll say.
Yeah.
So what's that process like?
So are you asking me, like, what's the next step? Like, if people want to work with me? Okay.
So, a little bit of everything.
I would say
the next step
like
in your journey, personally, professionally, and like long-term goal.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to work with me, most basic thing you can do is follow me on Instagram. That's my favorite social media outlet. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. If you're a podcast listener, even if you're not, my podcast is called Fragmented to Whole: Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. You can find me on any podcast outlet or go to fragmentedtowhole.com, and you will find ways to get to every conceivable podcast outlet. I also do boundaries coaching. And in fact, this week is the last week to register. I'm doing an 8-week Build Better Boundaries program for women. So there's a kickoff on Zoom on this coming Saturday, the 16th, from 2 to 5. And then the weekly program is on Wednesday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern time, 7 to 8:30 for 8 weeks. And it's open to women. And I have a growing multimedia curriculum on how to build better boundaries. I also have a workbook. So the coaching calls, they'll learn about how to build better boundaries. We'll go over a module. They'll go through the curriculum, and then they go to the workbook, which is where they do weekly exercises to build their own boundary system. That means they're taking everything they're learning and applying it to their own personal life. I cannot tell you the transformations that I have led people through. It's astonishing to me that the journey of building boundaries, which took me, I would say, like 2 to 3 years through this like meandering process in 12-step recovery, I've learned how to accelerate that process for people, which is the curriculum that I came up with. And I'm astonished at the changes for people. If none of that is appealing to you, you'd rather work with me one-on-one. I have a 12-week coaching program. The curriculum is the same, except for that they get tons of individualized feedback with me. I also have lots of free resources on boundary building on my Instagram account. Just go back through my feed. I do reels and posts all the time. I have a bunch of free stuff on my website as well. And I think, you know, like dipping your toes in, if it sounds to you like codependence is an issue for you, the ACA program, you can go to adultchildren.org. You can go, I think it's coda.org for codependence. If you have a problem with compulsive overeating or sugar addiction, Overeaters Anonymous is OA.org. If alcohol is your problem, AA.org. You know, if you just Google 12-step recovery, I think there's some like 200 and something 12-step recovery programs for all kinds of things. Also, you can reach out to me because I'd be happy to get you connected with the program that you need. The best way to do that is go on, you know, DM me on Instagram. You can also email me, Barb at higherpowercc.com. I'd love to get you connected with whatever kind of help that you need. But I think, you know, admitting to yourself, my life isn't working and I want it to change. And listen, I was 52 when I got into recovery. And it's never too late. I've met people who have been in their late 60s when they got into recovery, and it's better to have even 1 year of happy, joyous, and free life than not to have it at all. And so help is possible. Recovery is possible. It is like, it's never too late. Healing is possible, and no one is beyond hope. No one. I don't care how hopeless you think it is for you. It's not. I've seen worse.
Whew. That's a lot to handle. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Whew. It's a little bit hot in here. Oh my God. It's a lot. Oh my God. Bluez, you okay?
Yeah. Whew. It's telling too much truth. The internet said, no, not this much truth.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we have a last minute of the podcast, and just any more words of inspirational advice you just want to give somebody. We just want to give this time to you. So, Barb, go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be keep the focus on yourself. And one of the best ways to do that when you're talking with other people is to use I language. So for example, if you are someone is overwhelming you and you feel like they're too much for you or they're driving you crazy, don't say that. Don't say you're driving me crazy, you're too much for me. Say, I need some alone time. Right? Because that's the actual issue, is that you need some alone time, you need to decompress. And communication is actually more likely to happen when you keep the focus on yourself. If you say, you're driving me crazy, first of all, using the word you is going to put them on the defensive. And when you use an inflammatory word like crazy, it's even more likely to put them on the defensive. Conflict is likely to ensue rather than communication. So keep the focus on yourself. And a super easy way to do that is to use I language. It's very difficult for someone else to dispute, well, you don't actually need alone time, but it's very easy for them to dispute, you are driving me crazy, or you are too much for me. So I would say keep the focus on yourself. And the other thing is, please take really good care of yourself. You know, one of the phrases that we use in recovery to convey that is HALT. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? If you are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, you want to halt. If you're hungry, eat. If you're angry, express that anger in a constructive way. If you're lonely, connect with another person. And if you're tired, please rest. Like, take care of this meat suit that you're walking around in. Don't ignore it.
Absolutely. Barb, thank you so much for being part of, if I can barely speak, because I need to take care of myself. Thank you so much for being part of the program. Myself, Preston, and EZ Bluez is in the building for Behind the Brand on WNHH LP 103.5 FM New Haven. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Are we signing off?
Wondering what to write about, trying to figure out what it's all about. Existentialist, am I worth anything or just a scout? I don't know. Spending time all alone, sending my songs to the phone.